So we've been studying biomolecules for some time now. But do you guys remember the original context in which you first heard about proteins, carbohydrates, fats, etc.? You probably heard about them first in the context of nutrients and nutrition. And this chapter does end with that theme once again. So there are some things you need to know about nutrients and nutrition that I will explain to you here. But generally this part is to be studied from NCERT before an examination because it consists almost entirely of mugging up and memorizing things, and there's very little conceptual in it. I'll teach you whatever is conceptual, and then the rest you'll have to do by yourself. Okay. So where do we begin? Nutrients basically come in various ways, various forms, but one common categorization is the essential versus the non-essential ones. Now you might wonder, if something is non-essential, why do we even consider it a nutrient? And the answer is, by non-essential we don't mean that we don't use that compound, we mean that we can create it within our own body, like vitamin D. It's a nutrient, but we can create it if exposed to sunlight. Many nutrients actually are created from other nutrients. So for instance, if you don't generally need to just drink glucon D to get glucose, right? You don't need a direct access to glucose. You can eat other sugary foods, and the sucrose in them will be broken down and you will get the glucose from there. Similarly, amino acids are often interconvertible, and our body can carry out those interconversions fairly well. So if you take certain amino acids, you'll be able to survive because your body will be able to create the other ones. On that note, one thing that you should read up on is essential amino acids. You should read up on essential amino acids. Okay, there'll be a list of them in NCERT. Out of all the 20 amino acids I've listed, which ones are essential and which ones are not. Remember that this categorization is specific to human beings, and in the bacterial organisms in which much of the stuff that I taught you was actually first studied, like the transcription, translation, etc. This question doesn't even arise because bacteria can make all amino acids from each other. They do not need to have any one of them per se. There's nothing that they cannot make. So this is something that's defined only for these guys. Then another essential nutrient that you're very familiar with probably is water. Okay. But the last set of essential, and there are a few others of course, like you have to have some sugar, certain fats, but the most important set of essential nutrients are called This is actually the original spelling of vitamin, because the first vitamins discovered were always found to contain an amino group, and it comes from vital amine. After the discovery that not all of these have amino groups, the E was scratched out and the name became vitamins, and now it doesn't mean anything, but that's the origin of the word. So what is a vitamin? As I said, it doesn't mean anything. Just any substance you need in really small quantities without which your body can't function is known as a vitamin. Okay, but there are two or three major categories into which it comes, and the really major thing is vitamins are what are known as cofactors. Okay, now what is a cofactor? A cofactor is basically something that that is required to make an enzyme work. We've already studied about allosteric regulation, right, where something comes and sits on another site and that boosts or reduces the efficacy of the enzyme. So these cofactors are things that have to be present at some other site on the enzyme to force the enzyme into such a shape where it's actually able to catalyze that reaction by banging those molecules together or by tearing them apart. If this cofactor isn't present at some other point, then it's not going to work. It has to be present at some point in the enzyme to make the actual active site of the enzyme work properly. So the majority of these vitamins are indispensable cofactors for certain enzymes, and when those enzymes don't work correctly, lo and behold, these diseases appear, like night blindness, cracked lips, nervous disturbances, etc. These are all because of improperly functioning enzymes. But those enzymes only are dysfunctional not because there's something wrong in them, but because they're lacking these cofactors, which are vital. Okay, cofactors actually themselves come in two kinds. One is coenzymes. Coenzymes are what vitamins are. They come, they bind onto the enzyme when it's being used. When the enzyme is degraded, they come off again. Maybe they'll get onto some other enzyme. They are not present with the enzyme from scratch. They're just loosely associated. And the other kind is a prosthetic group. The other kind is a prosthetic group. Just like the name suggests, what is something prosthetic? Like a prosthetic limb. It's something that's firmly attached, right? So these are covalently and permanently bound cofactors. So most vitamins are obviously coenzymes. And one other function that one particular vitamin does, that's vitamin C. Vitamin C is a reductant. It's an antioxidant. In chemistry, like pure chemistry, we've studied about radicals, those things that have unpaired electrons. There are many oxidative radicals in our body, and they go around carrying out oxidation reactions every time they react with something. These radicals are produced in many biochemical reactions. To scavenge these up, to get reduced, instead of other things getting instead of other things getting oxidized, this vitamin C will go and get oxidized, and it will protect the rest of the body. Or say something does get oxidized, this vitamin C will go and reduce that compound down to its normal state. So it prevents all our biomolecules from getting oxidized by these various free radicals. So it is also essential. So each of these vitamins are soluble in different media. The rule is basically any vitamin that has a B or vitamin C is water soluble. The other vitamins, D, E, and K, as well as A, are fat soluble. Only vitamin H is an exception over here. Vitamin H is not soluble in either. It is neither soluble in fat nor is it soluble in water. Okay? And then there are some deficiency diseases. I've written them down just for the sake of it, but I would hope that you would read this from your book as well, because they're written in more detail over there with a few more examples of the symptoms of the diseases, which I have not mentioned. But basically you have night blindness or xerophthalmia, beriberi from vitamin B1, and then vitamin B6 causes nervous disturbances. Vitamin B12, this is an interesting one, I should mention this. Vitamin B12 has a really huge structure. I advise you to look it up. It's one of the hugest structures seen, and it was solved in the last century by a team of some 150 scientists something, working all over the world, what the structure is like. And then this genius of an organic chemist called Robert Burns Woodward synthesized it. And if I'm not wrong, no one has been able to synthesize it from scratch since then. There's only one known method. It's a really complicated, really huge protein, and it a vitamin, and it really resembles hemoglobin in some ways in terms of the structure, except it has a cobalt ion at the center, whereas hemoglobin has an iron ion at the center. Anyways, if vitamin B12 isn't there, you will get pernicious anemia, which means that there will be a lack of hemoglobin in your cells. So the two are linked. Okay. Vitamin C causes scurvy. This we've been hearing about since childhood, about how sailors who sailed with Columbus and Magellan didn't have access to fresh fruit, so they would develop scurvy and their gums would bleed. So this is there. Vitamin D causes rickets in children and osteomalgia in adults. Again, well-known stuff. All of these are well known. Maybe vitamin H you may not have heard of before. It causes hair loss and dermatitis. Vitamin K is pretty famous. It helps your body clot whenever there's a cut. It helps the blood clot up. So if there's less vitamin K, it will take longer for your cuts to heal, and so you'll bleed for longer. And that concludes vitamins, and that effectively concludes the entire chapter. Please remember to look up which amino acids are essential in your book and what diseases are caused by which vitamins when you're reading through it before an examination. Okay.